Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Frank Carroll. I'm a veteran of the Forest Service for many years. I was in Boise for 10 years back when these big fires first started, and I have a presentation I'd like to make. It's a USB. Yep. For the last 12 years, I've been a wildfire consultant and an expert witness in various cases across the country, and then also helping people understand wildfire impacts and fire ecology, wildfire forensics, how we fight fire, and what the result of that is. And so I want to tell you a little story that's pretty shocking. It's less shocking now than it was when we started. How do I advance the slide here?
Yeah, you can just go left.
There, so. Okay, so my company is Professional Forest Management, Wildfire Pros. I want to talk about inverse condemnation by wildfire, and I think it's fascinating that we have this body of photography now across the country that includes any element that you want, really. This is not AI, this is a photograph. And so I don't know what he's talking about, but he's talking to somebody. There's a new Forest Service here now. When I was a hotshot squad boss on the Santa Fe National Forest hotshot crew, we didn't have any of this stuff. These guys, they remind me of when my grandfather's pictures being on the border, the Mexican border in 1914, riding against Pancho Villa. And here's these lads, they're having a great time. They're armed with bandoliers full of ignition devices and pistols to shoot them. I don't see any hand tools, but they've got their fire shelters and they've got their stuff. And I want to talk about what this means. There's a young woman who spent time on a hotshot crew, and then she's become a fairly successful writer named Amanda Monthai. And in 2020, both in Science magazine and almost simultaneously in Atlantic magazine, she had this article. And it was titled, Land Managers Can't Burn the West Fast Enough. And the premise was prescribed burns, which can create buffers against large fires, can only do so much. In other words, I think you all know that for all the talk and discussion about prescribed fire, the Forest Service doesn't have the staff to do the EISs and to do the comply with the substantive and laws that relate to that. And so they'd like to do a lot of prescribed fire in the shoulder seasons when it's cool in the fall and cool in the spring, but they can't. And so they want to do that. And so these, what they've done is they've turned to wildfire as their principal management tool. And that's not an opinion, that's just the way, that's just what they've done. And they've had to do it for some reasons. I don't know if they're good ones, but I'll tell you about it. These huge wildfires that we're seeing in many cases are premeditated. They're not by accident, they're not a result of not enough firefighters, they're not a result of any other independent factors. They're not a result of climate change, although the climate, I'm not arguing about the climate's variable. They're a result of purposeful activity. We call these hotshot crews now the asphalt hotshots because they like to stand on the road and shoot fire. And I'm not here to attack firefighters, I am a firefighter. And what Amanda said is if the location is right, if extreme weather's not predicted, if the appropriate resources are on hand, if the skies are blue, if all is well, if we're not hungry, it'll go perfectly and it'll be awesome. And none of those conditions I submit are ever present. What we've seen for since 2017 is the Forest Service lighting, what they call firing operations now. They no longer call them burnouts and backfires. Now they call them firing operations. They're lighting these fire operations at 2 o'clock in the afternoon with red flag winds. In a case on the Roosevelt fire in Wyoming in 2018, an operation like that, by the midnight sun, hotshots burned 54 homes, the most expensive of which was $3 million. near Jackson Hole. And so what they're doing is, the chief puts out a letter to the troops, chief of the Forest Service, Randy Moore, puts out a letter to the troops every summer in the spring, and he says, here's what we're going to do. We're going to use unplanned fire to reintroduce fire to fire-depleted ecosystems. By unplanned fire, there's no nuance there. It's not naturally caused fire. It's not human-caused fire. As I'll show you, a military aircraft dropping flares in a very important defensive maneuver, start a fire. They used that one. I'll show you how that worked. What I like about this slide, though, all these pictures, by the way, are pictures taken by firefighters and posted on Instagram. You can do pound West Fire, and you can see a bunch of pictures of what's happening right now in Arizona on the Mogollon Rim, or your old fires here, lava and so on. To reintroduce fire to fire-depleted ecosystems. What do you notice about that picture? And I'll tell you, it's saguaro cacti that are 400 years old, many of them. And saguaro cactus, the forest plan on the Tonto National Forest prohibits anyone from destroying or modifying the upper Sonoran Desert, or the lower Sonoran Desert in this case, by damaging any of those cacti. You can go to jail for shooting a saguaro in that part of the world. There's a scenic byway right here where this firing is happening dedicated to the saguaros and Arizona cypress. And yet the fire team decided to take this action and go light all these hot spots around these cacti. There are miles of dead cactus. These firing operations in this particular fire were 40 miles long, up and down 2 major highways. I'll show you that. And they have support for this. This is the International Association for Wildland Fire, and these are credible people, and they're saying that fire is good. I agree with that. Fire in many conditions is good. Ponderosa pine forest and lodgepole pine forest depend on fire. But the way we're doing it now, I'll show you, is I don't think what we had in mind. This is a little fire that I've been following in Arizona on the Mogollon Rim, which is the breaks from the high country on the Coconino near Flagstaff that falls off into the deserts into Phoenix and Tucson and so on. And a little fire started called the Wildfire. And at this point, it started out as an acre and just swirled around like many of you have seen. Wasn't any problem to anybody. And at this point, they were estimating that it was 10 acres. And somebody asked the question earlier, I think it was Dar, about smoke jumpers. What happened to smoke jumpers? They just disbanded the Gila smoke jumper base. Smoke jumpers in the early days, after World War II and all the way through the 70s into the 80s, jumped sometimes 2 jumps a day, sometimes 6 or 7 a week. I wanted to tell you this statistic here to tell you about what happened to rapid initial attack with smoke jumpers. Right now, it costs about $35,000 a season to train a smoke jumper. These smoke jumpers are averaging 4 jumps a season. Why is that? Smoke jumpers are designed for rapid initial attack to put fires out. What if your agency policy is not to put fires out, but to let them be reintroduced to fire-depleted ecosystems? Then you no longer need smoke jumpers. You won't call them and you won't use them. And that's exactly what's happening. This is the Wildfire I was talking about, and what I wanted to see here is that it started out as it was a little fire back here that operated in a typical way in the Southwest, predominant southwest wind. It started back here on the tail of that little kidney bean shaped deal and kind of ran up to the northeast, and they caught it. But they didn't catch it very hard, and they decided, you know what, we're going to use this thing, and we're going to burn a bunch of this country up. And maybe that's a good idea. I don't know. I don't think it's a good idea at the time of year that they did. But what I want you to see is that we no longer have to depend on federal press releases about what they're doing or what they say they're doing in public meetings. We can now follow in real time each one of those red dots with the bright white in the middle is coming from 3 or 4 different satellite sources. And so these are 6 hours old. And so if you want to know what the agency